So is masculinity under attack today? It really feels like you hear that question everywhere, doesn't it? Social media, news. It's definitely a hot topic.
It really is. And you, listening right now, you're probably seeing these debates play out all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we want to try and unpack this, pull apart the arguments, give you a clear path to understanding what's really being debated without all the extra noise online.
Yeah, exactly. We're working from this article, Text Calais, which really digs into how our understanding of being a man is changing.
Right.
Our goal here is to pull out the key insights, look at the different viewpoints the article presents, and really get to the bottom of this whole discussion. Is it actually under siege, or is something else going on?
Okay, let's get into it then. The article kicks off by reminding us that, well, how we see masculinity hasn't always been this debated. Historically, there were some pretty clear, maybe even rigid expectations for men.
Yeah, think about those classic roles, the provider, the protector.
The strong, silent type.
Exactly. The leader, sort of dominant figure, both out in the world and at home. Those were the boxes, more or less.
And the article makes a point that these roles themselves weren't automatically seen as negative in their time, right?
Yeah.
They provided structure, maybe a sense of purpose even.
True. But the key thing the article highlights is the inflexibility. There just wasn't a lot of wiggle room for men who didn't fit that exact mold or wanted something different.
Right. Then fast forward to the 20th century, and you have the rise of feminism.
A huge shift.
Huge. And obviously advocating for women's rights and equality, that naturally started to challenge those traditional male models too.
It had to, really. It pushed for a rethink of gender roles across the board. Suddenly there was this encouragement for men to be, more emotionally open.
Share parenting more equally.
Yeah, and re-examine those old power dynamics. It was a necessary change, but change can be messy.
And the article suggests this shift, while positive overall, did create some confusion.
Yeah.
Maybe some questions for men.
Well, yeah. If the old definition, the stoic breadwinner, wasn't the only way, then what did it mean to be a man? The old rules were being questioned, but the new ones weren't always crystal clear.
Which leads us straight into this whole toxic masculinity debate. This is a big one.
It really is. Now, the article points out the term originally came from psychologists, sociologists.
Right. It wasn't initially meant as an attack, was it?
No, not according to the source. It was intended to pinpoint specific harmful behaviors, sometimes tied to those traditional norms like excessive aggression, bottling up emotions completely, that need to dominate others.
Okay, so specific negative behaviors, not masculinity itself.
That was the original idea. But you know how language works? It kind of took on a life of its own in public discussion.
And that's where the controversy really heats up, isn't it? The article mentions some people feel it's now used much more broadly.
Exactly. Almost like a catch-all criticism for just being masculine. The argument presented is that traits once admired, competitiveness, ambition, being assertive, are now sometimes framed negatively.
So some men feel like they're being criticized just for expressing things that used to be seen as, well, normal male traits.
That's the feeling the article describes, yes. That feeling of being targeted, maybe unfairly. It really highlights the importance of nuance, which often gets lost.
Yeah, context is everything. Is being competitive bad? Or is it about how you compete?
Precisely. And when that nuance disappears, that's when you get this sense of being under attack.
The article also touches on media portrayals, which is interesting. How we see men on screen has changed too.
Definitely. Think about older heroes, often very strong, very stoic, not showing much emotion.
John Wayne types.
Right. And while those archetypes still exist, we're seeing a lot more male characters now who are more complex emotionally, vulnerable even.
Which the article presents as kind of a double-edged sword.
Sort of. On one hand, it's seen as healthier, more realistic, perhaps, but the flip side, according to the piece, is that some people see the decline of those old-school strong heroes as a sign that masculinity itself is being devalued, like something is being lost.
And you layer that on top of, online culture where sometimes traditionally masculine things are mocked.
Yeah, you can see how that narrative of being under siege or constantly judged starts to build for some people.
Okay. Let's shift focus slightly. The article brings in some hard data here about challenges men are facing.
Yes, and this is really important context. It mentions things like men falling behind in education compared to women, rising rates of depression and suicide, loneliness.
The stats are pretty concerning, aren't they? Lower college completion rates in the U.S., significantly higher suicide rates. It makes you stop and think.
It really does. And the article links this potentially to a lack of support systems. It suggests that while women have benefited hugely from empowerment movements and building strong communities,
Men haven't always had the same.
sometimes, yes, they might lack that clear guidance or readily available support, especially, the article notes, in situations like growing up without a strong father figure or lacking positive male role models nearby.
But then the article takes a really crucial turn, doesn't it? It pushes back on the idea that this is all just an attack.
Exactly. It suggests maybe the problem isn't that masculinity is under fire, but that the old, inflexible models of masculinity just aren't working anymore. They don't fit the modern world.
So it's less about erasure and more about evolution.
That's the argument. It's about needing to redefine masculinity for today, moving away from just dominance and suppressing emotions towards things like responsibility, emotional intelligence, integrity, real strength, but defined differently.
So not throwing out everything traditionally male, but changing how it's expressed. Like strength isn't just about being tough.
Precisely. The article gives examples. Strength can include the courage to be vulnerable. Leadership isn't just dominance, it's earning respect. Competition is fine, but it needs empathy and fairness alongside it.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about adapting those traits.
Yeah, the article argues that the strongest forms of modern masculinity actually embrace change. They don't fight it. It's about a deeper kind of strength, emotional, ethical, not just physical or financial.
Which leads to the idea of societal responsibility.
Yeah,
How do we respond to all this?
right. The article stresses a balance. We absolutely need to challenge harmful behavior, hold men accountable for abuse of power, for destructive actions, no question.
Not just focus on the negative.
Exactly. It argues we also need to actively uplift and celebrate the positive contributions. Men who lead with integrity, protect the vulnerable, act as responsible figures in families and communities.
And how do we support that? The article had suggestions, right?
Yeah, practical things. Like encouraging mentorship programs for boys and men, investing more in male mental health services.
Creating spaces for honest conversations.
Yes. Honest talks about purpose, identity, what it means to be a man today without judgment, just exploring it.
Because just vilifying all men is counterproductive.
Totally. The article makes the point that empowering men to grow in healthy ways actually benefits everyone. Healthier, more engaged men strengthen the whole community.
So wrapping this up, the big picture from the article seems to be maybe under attack isn't quite the right frame. It's more like a massive cultural shift.
A transformation, yeah. A crossroads where the old models are being seriously questioned and new definitions are trying to emerge.
And that kind of change can definitely feel like an attack to some people while feeling like liberation to others.
Absolutely. It's unsettling territory either way, potentially.
But the core idea is that masculinity isn't dying out, it's evolving.
Right. It's changing. And that brings challenges, sure, but also opportunities to build something maybe better, more sustainable.
Which really brings us back to that fundamental question the article poses.
What kind of masculinity do we actually want to build for the future? For the next generation, it's a huge question.
So for you listening, the key takeaways here are this whole masculinity under attack thing is layered. There's history, there's the tricky debate around toxic masculinity, there are real challenges men face, and there's this big push for redefinition.
It's definitely more evolution than simple destruction, based on this analysis.
Yeah. So maybe take a moment after this to reflect on these different angles. How do you see these shifts playing out in your own life or in the world around you?
It's worth thinking about.
And just one final thought to leave you with, building on all this. If masculinity is evolving, what single quality do you think will be the most important for men to cultivate in the coming years? And maybe why? Something to mull over.